I recognize the member from Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Thank you, Speaker. And I'm very pleased to be here co-sponsoring this bill, the Homelessness Ends with Housing Act, with MPP Clancy. I return the thanks to her for working together on this. It really has been a pleasure to work with you and your team. And I also want to say thank you to my caucus colleagues for being here. Hard challenges require us as legislators to work across party lines to ensure progress. Given what we're seeing across our communities in Ontario, the size and scale of growth in homelessness warrants this approach to prioritizing a plan to address it. I'm sure that all of you can relate. Today I'm going to talk about why it's important. I'm going to talk about what we think we should do, and the good news is there are solutions and there's proof that it could work. So first of all, why is this important? Speaker, I always believe that it's important to consider the experiences for individual people as well as the data when we make choices on our priorities. So here's two stories. People might recall a media story from last summer of a 91-year-old man deeply connected to his community in Little Italy who became homeless when he lost his apartment of 20 years and could not find any affordable housing in his community. Or you might remember last January, when the depth and breadth of the homelessness and housing crisis was brought home to the Ontario legislature, when former MPP Lorenzo Berardinetti shared his deeply personal story of becoming homeless. And his story could be anyone's story. A job loss, a marriage breakdown, and a devastating illness. And in telling his story, he recounted people who learned of it and what they said to him. They said, they are concerned that they may become homeless as well one day. And a lot of people are afraid of that. Ontarians are stressed and they're worried about affordability. In fact, 3 of 5 people, when asked, are they concerned that if their financial situation were to change, would they be at risk at losing their housing? But these are just 2 stories behind the numbers. So here's the quick run of the facts that we know. Last year, Ontario municipalities collectively counted over 80,000 homeless people in communities, large and small, rural and urban, a 25% increase in 2 years. Those are outcomes that we need to address. There's a need for at least 36,000 supportive housing units, where people who face mental illness, substance use disorders, developmental disabilities, or chronic health conditions can have stable housing. Toronto Food Banks set another record this year, 4.1 million client visits. Through their research, we know 88% of their clients are in housing that's unaffordable and the remainder are homeless. And of concern are the growing numbers of seniors who are becoming homeless. For example, the rates of homelessness among seniors have doubled in the Niagara region in the last 5 years. Like many of your communities, I too hear from constituents that are concerned. I've seen more and more people relying on food banks, and we had 38 encampments in Etobicoke Lakeshore last year. But the solutions are out there, and we know they pay dividends both economically and socially. We just need to decide to set goals, actually. Let's set real goals and prioritize action. And that is exactly what this bill is calling for, Speaker. I would hope that everyone in this legislature could actually easily get behind it, because I think the vast majorities of MPPs in Ontario relate to the need. But again, the most important action is to just make the decision to do something about it. Set a 10-year goal, set a 4-year goal, set a 2-year goal, but set a goal. What are the components of this strategy in this bill? Set housing targets that will lead to improved housing affordability and ensuring a plan is put in place to create adequate availability of deeply affordable rental units, invest in new housing that includes supportive housing, increase the portable housing supports benefit, use a housing-first approach. Focus on quickly moving people experiencing homelessness into independent and permanent housing without preconditions. And then finally, let's make sure we can measure it. I mean, I don't know about all of you, but the classic mantra in business is that you set a goal and you actually measure your progress to achieving that goal. I'm not sure why we feel worried about setting a goal. And we just need to set up the systems to actually measure whether we're achieving what we need to. I was asked earlier today in a media interview about this bill why I thought it was important to co-sponsor it now. And it's because it would fill a gap we've got in our current housing and other policies. We must address the increasing unaffordability that people are experiencing, the job loss, the rising cost of rents, and it needs to stop. We need to help people hold on to their housing, and we need to get those that need it housed. But secondly, the other good reason to do this now is because Canadians want us to do it, to address the problems of homelessness. They want to do this. More than 80% believe that the solutions to homelessness have to include housing, mental health, and other health supports, not incarceration. And if the government were to support this bill, appoint a single person accountable for addressing homelessness within your government, and we would be doing exactly what people want us to do. Thirdly, without action, the size of the problem will continue to grow. That is certain. Now, the good news is, similar to the member opposite, I also spent some time traveling in Ontario, making sure I got outside of Toronto to see what some of the promising solutions could be. And communities are coming together to come up with innovative solutions with the resources they have available. A great example was Peterborough. In one day, Speaker, I toured 4 different sites that represented the different stages that we need to actually bring people out of homelessness. I visited the Trinity Centre, which was a daily gathering place for day programs, which unfortunately was overflowing. That is where I saw very directly the growing numbers of seniors, and talking to the staff there that's their biggest need, given the rental trends in that community. The Brock Mission was my next spot, and it has a beautiful new location with 30 traditional dorm-style shelter beds, but coupled with 15 single independent units that people can live in a more supported environment and shared resources with primary care right on site. The Wolfe Street location was my third spot. And this is, again, like Better Tent City and other places where they built 50 tiny homes that are supported by common spaces for residents. And what was interesting there was speaking to residents, they feel more safe. One resident said, I harm myself less. And, as well, they feel a sense of community. This site was built across the street from a previous encampment, and police visits have been reduced from 67 in the previous year to 4. My last stop was some long-term housing that the city has built very quickly through a modular approach, and they're leveraging that asset now where people are coming in for more stable housing, but they're leveraging it to build more. But I think, again, this is an example of a community coming together and figuring out how to do that. The challenge is we need these approaches in all municipalities, and they can't do it alone. They need the province to step up, and I was struck meeting with community leaders at the AMO conference this year just how prevalent homelessness was, and they're aching for solutions. The same conference, I learned about a promising pilot in Burlington that targets low-income seniors at high risk of losing their house. Now, getting a little upstream, the Community Wellness Hub coordinates and provides supports to ensure access to primary care, mental health care, social connections, and a system access for their most vulnerable population. They've estimated savings of $90 million per year from reduced hospitalizations related to chronic conditions for 100,000 older adults. Finally, we know there's a connection between housing and health for those experiencing health. For many, it started by losing their job or being unable to pay rent, and then they were homeless. Their other health concerns came later: mental illness, drug use. So we need to ensure that the solutions that support people to stay well are there, and we also need to reduce the pressures that we're seeing in emergency department. And this is where I saw one last very promising option, Speaker, and that is the 24/7 Mental Health Crisis Centre in London that triages patients outside of hospital, enables paramedics and police to bring people to a clinic with an average wait of 13 minutes to get the kind of assessment that they need, instead of spending hours in the emergency department. It also has 10 beds available to support stabilization, and it's also a walk-in too. So somebody's ready to engage in their care, they can walk in and they can access it. But again, we need the provincial leadership. The province has critical mandates on health, mental health, infrastructure, housing policy, and the last thing they have is provincial lands. The federal government and the City of Toronto are leveraging underused properties to attract the private sector into creating mixed, affordable, rent-geared to income and market-based developments. And the province, actually, could be doing the same. The province has important levers that require portions of building projects to include affordable, deeply affordable, or supportive housing options. We actually do see some developers stepping up to do just that, but there is little in our current policy or the review process at the OLT that would demand this. For over 20 years now, jurisdictions in Canada, Europe, and the United States have been using the Housing First approach for those who need it. Housing First takes the approach to support people suffering from mental illness or addiction or both to a much better place for recovery. And again, I do feel like it's important to say that we know that these things can work. We shouldn't be afraid of setting goals because we know that we will get results. Researchers in Calgary studied their Housing First approach over 6 years. 55% enrolled in the program remained housed. Finland did what we are asking for in this bill. They made a decision to do something about homelessness, shifting away from shelters and actually putting that money into getting people housed. 72% reduction in people living rough. And France is doing an outstanding work. They're actually doing a major study of what the impact would be, and the early 21 months already show greater residential stability and fewer arrests, greater control over drug and alcohol use, and better health outcomes, and lower residential and health costs. These are the kind of results that we need. We need them in Ontario, and we need to make a decision to act. In conclusion, stable housing helps people manage health issues, overcome addiction, and find stable employment. We have the data, we have the roadmaps, and we know Housing First works. All that is needed is for the Ontario government to take clear and decisive action. We can solve homelessness in 10 years. I hope it might even take less. We call on MPPs from all parties to work together and support this bill to address one of the most challenging issues facing our communities today. Thank you.